This is a tale of a town and of the townsfolk, the Lord Mayor and corporation, big business, little business, the fishermen, the mothers, and the Copperwheats. But the heroes, or villains according to your point of view, are two men with a plan. James Paton Watson, the city engineer, and Professor Abercrombie. What they have to offer is something of a challenge to the way we live. It began, as far as I'm concerned, when we docked at Southampton. Cheerful, rowdy bunch, desperately eager to get home. But after 5 years away, none of us had the least idea what we were coming back to. Some of us made out we were pessimistic, just so we couldn't be disappointed. What now? No home, no job, and a paper shortage. Fine thing for a writer to come home to. Trafalgar Square seems to have shrunk. The time of destruction is ended. The era of reconstruction begins. What's that got to do with Nelson, anyway? The time of destruction is ended. The era... We never talk that sort of stuff in the desert. But the boys talked a lot about their towns, hometowns. Can't exactly call London a hometown. More like a place to get lost in, or to hide in. Wish I'd get that tune out of my head. About time I got down to some writing, once I've caught up with what's going on. More reconstruction? What about this freedom we're supposed to have fought for? Looks as though catching up is going to be pretty heavy going. No harm done, even if he doesn't reply.
You can't wander around the dockyards without a special permit from the Admiralty.
You'll never pin Abercrombie down. He's the most elusive man in England.
But dear, it's so dull. Why not something with a story?
You'd better put some sex in it if you wanted to sell.
Planning's all right on paper, but it'll never come to anything.
If it's for the green identity card, you have to have 3.
There's no accommodation and nothing to do at night.
There's one at 10:30 in the morning, but you'll probably have to stand. Next, please.
Devonshire in the summer. Thanks. Don't you ever get any summer? Sometimes, in the winter. I take it you know the Pilgrim Fathers left from here. So I've heard. Doesn't surprise me either. I'll be seeing you.
Funny, one only has to be with an American for all the bad things about a place to seem worse. He might have done better in the way of a station. Hope I'm going to like it here. Mustn't let anything interfere with work. A lot of reading to do. Still, it might be as well to get the feminine angle. Certainly been knocked about. Palm trees. If they only had them at the station, sunny Devon wouldn't have seemed quite such a myth. There lay the Sound and the island with green leaves down beside the water. The town, the Hoe, the masts with sunset fired. Masts with sunset fired. That's one way of looking at it. What about there being no gardens? Nowhere but the streets for the children to play. A poet might like that for a theme. Strange that a town without gardens should have a strip of grass known to half the world. The Elizabethans and Drake. History gives so much to a city that half the time one looks at the past instead of facing up to the present. Quaint? Maybe. But what goes on? The planners call it a city of almost 250,000 people. So congested that in some areas there are 230 to the acre. What does that mean? Human beings squeezed together like flies, living in conditions as primitive and rather less healthy than those of the Middle Ages. There's the Mayflower Stone. History again. People come from the States to look at it. We think of America when we see it. Perhaps there's something more to be made of that. And it's the nearest port for America. And it's as a port that the town has grown and prospered. It was the first town to send a woman to Parliament. Lady Astor was the undefeated candidate for 25 years. And coming from Virginia, history gave the city another link with the United States. And what are the surroundings? Pure picture postcard with all the appropriate adjectives. The rolling farmland, shimmering streams, lush valleys, old world villages, winding lanes, and the windswept moor. It might be the most beautiful setting in the world, but eating into the farmland are loosely scattered houses, unplanned housing estates and sprawling suburbs. This was Plymouth until...
Again last night, the Luftwaffe carried out a successful attack on Plymouth. Nothing remains of the city but piles of rubble interspersed with vast bomb craters, with the result that chaos has disrupted the entire way of life of the people. Plymouth is concentrated. Plymouth is devastated beyond repair.
Come on.
Take a seat, please.
Thank you.
What is your full name?
George Copperwheat. Wife and 3 daughters, and mother-in-law.
Where do you employ?
Engine smith in the dockyard.
Are you still going to carry on your unemployment?
I have to.
Any furniture left?
Not a stick.
Well, I'm afraid your billet will be a good way out.
That means up half the night to get to work. Still, I'll have anything with a roof on.
Will I still have to go to school?
Certainly.
That's a thing I shall have to look into. The schools are already overcrowded.
Wouldn't do it any harm to stay home and learn a little housework.
Well, I can billet you with Mrs. Hines, the Lorrows, Harterbridge. I'll arrange transport with the Royal Navy.
I've had a word with Mrs. Hines. She says we'll be quite separate. All we have to do is to make ourselves at home.
Is that all?
Home. Still, it's pretty decent of her, I suppose. I'll make it up to her, you know, do 1 or 2 odd jobs and a bit of carpentry like.
I think that ought to be Granny's chair, Mummy. And Beg's this my toy cupboard. Will I have some more toys soon, Daddy?
You're not making any now, dear.
Not even utility?
Oh, it's only rubbishy stuff, not the sort that you like.
In that case, I ought to get compensation too.
The words that child gets hold of. Where exactly am I supposed to sleep?
In the kitchen. And Granny, Pat, and Jane will be with me in the bedroom. And I think, dear, you'd better sleep here.
I see. It'll seem queer after all these years.
I should simply love to sleep in the kitchen.
After the shelter, this is just like a palace. Especially my bedroom.
Well, let's start making it look like one. Give me a hand to clear this, Alice.
You'll have to do it quietly, dear.
Why?
Because Mrs. Hines is immediately below.
Oh, I see. Well, we'll ask her up sometimes. Must be lonely down there all by herself. Over in the corner, dear.
They've only given you 6 knives.
You know, I feel sorry for people with no family. No one to care for. No one to look after them. No one to live with.
Plymouth was more devastated than any other town in England. There was practically nothing left of the city centre, a fact that could be looked at in 2 ways.
What a mess it all is.
It's such a waste. That's what gets me.
But what an opportunity.
What do you mean, sir?
A town should be for the townsfolk what the country estate is for the rich man. A pleasant home to live in. Without this, we might never have had the chance.
Tidying up the town became an industry all its own. And it didn't take as long as you'd think. There was something to be said for the new market, with so many shops under one roof, out of the rain, away from the traffic. But the shopkeepers visualized the town just as it was before. That's my corner. Hands off was our first reaction. What times for the children. At last they found themselves in a city of playgrounds. What did it matter if home was a little stuffy, provided the weather held good and nobody leveled the sights? Most of old Plymouth had survived like a miracle. In spite of the bomb stories, the Barbican was still the Barbican. Several thousand people had died. But flowers were planted at St. Andrews and services held among the ruins. And the very people who had lost their homes spent most of the summer dancing on the Hoe. There was a new spirit in the air and a new movement afoot.
I want a series of charts that people can understand.
What have you got in mind, sir?
I want to show what makes living in cities unpleasant. The warrens that some people live in, the traffic bottlenecks, and the lack of open spaces.
That's going to mean a complete survey.
It's not my idea of a summer holiday. I don't know, there's something more depressing about 10-year plans and vast schemes.
Why, what would you do? Let everything drift?
I don't know. I wonder if this isn't all a bit remote.
Have you ever been run over?
No.
Have you ever been in the slums?
I can't say I have.
Have you ever looked at a housing estate?
I try not to.
I suggest you stop trying and go and have a look at the effort estate and gate crash the mothers' meeting.
Why?
Then you'll see for yourself whether all this is remote or not.
A mothers' meeting?
Not bad at all. Yet it doesn't compare with the old villages. What's wrong with progress that the building of the past is so much better? Now, who'd want to break up a signpost? Rather a nice one, too. I wonder if these are the people who put coal in the bath. Why did he ask if I'd ever looked at a housing estate? There must be something wrong with them, or other people would write about them. That looks like something from the Grapes of Wrath.
Are you interested in the community centre?
I'm interested in women. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
You can ask us anything you like.
I don't know where to begin. Tell me, do you like your new houses better than the ones you came from?
Yes.
Any complaints?
Yes.
What are they? Not all at once. What about you?
Well, the houses are too far from the shops, what with the hill and the pram.
There's no proper wash house. All the washing's done in the kitchen, and the whole place fills with steam.
Yes. And it even spoils the walls of the living room.
The water in the bath doesn't run properly. It's got to be filled with buckets. And I've got 4 children. It takes me from 5 to 10 to bath them.
I want a larger house. I have 7 children with three bedrooms. A boy of 15 wants a room of his own.
I don't see how you manage to do all the work. 7 children, the cooking, the shopping.
Well, I mean, it has to be done, hasn't it? I mean.
And yet you want a bigger house. That means more work. I noticed out there a lot of trees chopped down and a signpost broken.
Well, what can you expect? The children got nowhere to play and you can't look at them all the time.
Some people are advocating a return to the village green. That is, everyone has their own back gardens, while the houses face onto a large green. Would you prefer that?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I've learned quite a lot.
The whole place fills with steam. You have to fill the bath with buckets. A boy of 15 wants a room to himself. What was it Shaw said? Man's house hasn't changed as much in 1,000 years as a woman's bonnet in a score of weeks. And yet when he goes out to kill, he carries a marvel of mechanism.
Not tonight, dear. Twice a week is quite enough at your age.
But I must see my friends. There's nowhere to have them here.
I don't mind you going to Dorothy's.
But they're crowded out too, especially now at Dick's home.
George, are you sure you filled in that form for the prefabricated house?
For the 20th time, yes. All 6 of them.
Well, why don't we get an answer?
Don't ask me. Ask the government.
If we do get one, I hope to goodness I'll get a room of my own. And me. And me.
As long as it's a place of our own, I'll put up with anything.
That's what you say now.
But it will only be temporary.
Permanent temporaries, I call them. Do you know what they cost? 700 quid. I'm worth about 3, I reckon.
Well, please, may I go out?
How can I be expected to master the Industrial Revolution with all this going on?
Oh, Alice, do go out and let your sister get on with her homework.
And mind you're back not a moment later than 10.
All right. Well, goodbye, everybody.
Some people have all the fun.
Put the key under the mat in case the buses run late. Quieter, please.
Sorry, dear.
Wish I wasn't alone. Dorothy's late. Perhaps I ought to go home. Can't look anywhere for sailors. Hope they don't think I'm here to be picked up. Cheek. What does he think I am? Give me a chance. Perhaps I ought to stop. Or would it look silly? Might seem a bit stuck up. There's no harm, really. There's Dorothy at last. He's trying the same thing with her. That shows what he's like. Hope she won't let him get away with it. Wonder what he's called. Bet it's Hank or something like that. I knew it. Somehow Dorothy's not nearly as nice as she used to be. Jimmy and Jock. Think I'd like to be friends with both. Good thing Father can't see me now. I'm wearing a hole in my shoes. But it's worth it. He never stops chewing. But I like the way he smiles. Englishmen can't dance like this. It's not just to put an arm around a girl either. He really likes it. Fun dancing in the fresh air. I'd like to go on dancing all night. Just dancing and dancing.
And dancing and dancing and dancing on the hoe. Just as they did all through the ages. The Victoria's Jubilee. When Napoleon lay captive in the Sound. And in the days of Drake. Perhaps it's worthwhile trying to recapture the spirit of the past. The spirit of Shakespearean England. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise. This fortress, built by nature for herself, against infection and the hand of war. This happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England.
There's no need to be so bitter. Today, some of us have a different outlook, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. That, at any rate, is the philosophy behind our plan. We want to build so that everyone will have a chance of living a full life.
That sounds very nice, but is it really practical?
I'll leave that for you to judge.
So they called in Professor Abercrombie, and the businessmen made history by inviting him to treat the city centre as an open site. Beyond that, nobody quite knew what the professor was up to.
Here's a spot in the heart of the city where people can escape from the jostle of the crowds and go right back into the 16th century. What fine old buildings these are, with their thick walls, limestone and granite, built to weather the centuries, even stood up to the Blitz. This should be preserved, whatever happens. But in the new plan, we mustn't copy it. Modern building should make an effective contrast. This is just the place to come to after attending a council meeting. They tried, the Victorians, but all they did was to fake the past. Still, it has given spaciousness, and I like the way they've given the civic buildings a square all to themselves. It's a precinct and simplifies traffic. We can do the same with our shops and offices. The old fishing quarters, but all falling into decay. Yet Americans swarm here on their way from the Mayflower Stone. What a pity it looks so drab. All it needs is a few new buildings to harmonize with the old, grass and trees, and perhaps a meeting place, sort of community center. And how pleasant it would be to sit overlooking the harbor and taste the fresh fish. On the continent, they cater for visitors. Here you'd think they weren't wanted. The ideal street for getting run over. Narrow, congested, every kind of traffic all muddled up. All it should be is a link between the city centre and the dockyard. There oughtn't to be any shops here at all. Plymouth needs pale colours to respond to the sunlight. Buildings in limestone and concrete. Flat and vertical masses to give balance and an interesting skyline. What's really needed is a city to cheer people up.
But what was planning a city compared with the difficulty of getting a house?
Well, we ought to get one soon. I filled in 29 forms and only made one mistake.
And for the furniture?
I've got to have a night off sometimes.
Is it American?
You're right.
Then it's bound to be good.
Sort of dining room.
It's a living room. Look at these chairs.
You have to draw lots for who sits.
Few frilly curtains and things, and I think it would look as cute as cute.
No, I'd rather have it comfortable.
Seems to me you'll have to make it one or the other. It won't hold a sofa and a good-sized table.
Well, perhaps you can get one of the sort that turns upside down when you want to eat.
Will I play in here?
Yes, love, we all play in here. And eat. And do our homework. And listen to the radio. And paint our nails. And they cost $1,300 to make.
Plenty of cupboard space, a dish rack. They seem to have thought quite a lot about it.
Why don't we eat here?
At my time of life, I'm not starting to eat in the kitchen, especially without a scullery.
Awfully convenient, all in one room. There's only 2 bedrooms.
Where's Granny going to sleep?
Seem to have heard that before.
The thing is, where would we keep everything?
There's a cupboard here.
I thought that was the other bedroom. Still, there's one advantage. You could tell someone in the next room to put the kettle on without getting out of bed.
You could almost put it on without getting out of bed.
From the family point of view, there's no room to swing a cat.
Whoever wants to anyway.
Come away from that mirror.
The Southerners are used to thinking of themselves as a sleepy people, not nearly as go-ahead as they are in the north. And yet, of all the devastated cities, Plymouth was the first to have a plan. The townsfolk met to hear, as they thought, about an architect's design. But what the professor and the city engineer gave them was something rather different.
In all devastated cities, there are some people who long for the past. They would like to see their town rebuilt exactly as it used to be. But of course, where there's been so much destruction, that's out of the question. Besides, it wouldn't be their city at all. It would be a fake. Then there are the cautious, practical people who would like to take a snip here, widen a road there, round off a corner, and in a word, do as little as possible for the improvement of their town. The community
What is a town planner?
Fellow planet towns. Gets a series of small improvements that are out of date as soon as they're done. The third approach is to seize the opportunity to make the best possible use of the land in the interests of the community as a whole.
I hope I haven't missed my pint for nothing.
Won't hurt you.
Now, would somebody switch off the lights, please, and we have some pictures. Hilaire Belloc has said that a city, when it becomes congested and refuses to accept its only remedy, is bound to decay. Well, that mustn't happen here. And this is the way in which we mean to deal with the problem. Thank you. First, there were 3 small towns. They grew and grew until they joined up. By 1939, the countryside looked rather like measles. Yet in the city, there was still overcrowding, breeding areas for illness, crime, and an increasing C3 population. Is this going to continue, or are we going to tackle it? If so, the first thing we've got to do is to stop these sprawling suburbs and tidy them up into proper communities for human beings. But to make this possible, Plymouth, like many other cities, will have to extend its boundary. This is quite natural, because all these places depend on the town for their prosperity. But it does mean that part of Cornwall will become Devonshire.
You can't do that here.
Why the devil not?
Well, no carnishman likes to be called a Plymouthian.
Do I understand you want to forcibly shift people from the towns into the suburbs? What about the chaps that want to live near their work?
But they were already moving out of their own volition. All we want to do is to make it easier and more attractive.
Why not build flats?
They're not suitable for a large family. Besides, there's no need. Plymouth isn't London or New York. With a little skill in planning, there's plenty of room just outside.
The health of the townsfolk depends on the farmer getting a square deal. In our plan, the preservation of agricultural land for farming instead of private speculation is assured. It would be a pity if mankind can't preserve for his pleasure a few wild open spaces. For this, Dartmoor with its ponies is ideal. Some people like village life, some isolated cottages.
Haven't they, too, the right to live the way they choose?
Then let's keep our rural areas rural, and let's stop cutting villages in half with great arterial roads. Let's cater for the people who love the country. As often as not, they come from the town. But that brings us to the problems of roads.
Most of them were built for a sedate and leisurely way of life. Then a more dashing form of travel came along. When the car arrived, it was a national joke. But it got faster and faster. Yet the faster it was able to go, the slower it actually went. Until anyone driving a car as it's meant to be driven almost automatically becomes a criminal. Do you know that the casualties on the road during the war proved that our traffic was far more dangerous than bombing? The main victims, of course, are children. So we spray them with propaganda in the fond hope that they may cease to behave like children. That's what the motorist pays in taxation alone. If this sum had been spent on the roads, think of the tragedies that might never have happened. First, we must separate the different types of traffic. For this, we suggest a ring road round the town with several carriageways. And above all, no ribbon development. These roads are purely for traffic. They should have flyovers and bridges. No ugly hoardings. We'd rather have a look at the country. Nor is there any need for petrol stations to become eyesores. Good design is not expensive, and it's invariably more efficient. We suggest bays for parking. And more bridges for local pedestrians. Around the centre of the city, we've planned to have an inner ring road with links to the outer one. Do you know that we are falling far behind other countries with our roads? Look at America. Why should we remain behind the times?
In our opinion, wherever there's an area of 6,000 to 10,000 people, all these facilities should be provided. The city of the future should make it easy for people to get together. If we start planning for community life, it won't be easy to rear a docile people which takes its ideas from the radio and the newspapers.
Don't know what he's talking about.
The ideal town should provide various types of employment to suit different temperaments in the family. Here, of course, there's plenty of opportunity to encourage various industries. You can have fresh fish straight from the sea. At half the time you're eating fish from the north of England several days old. That's why we consider a town plan incomplete unless it's a regional plan accompanied by regional organization. And now for the key plan for the city centre. In a home, we don't try to eat in the bathroom or sleep in the kitchen. All we've tried to do is to plan the city as we might plan an ideal home.
Right down the centre, we've allowed for one monumental feature, a vista.
To achieve this, you, the citizens of Plymouth, must own the land. Mr. Paton Watson and I propose the vista as a victory memorial to those who lost their lives in the Blitz, the symbol of a standard of living with spaciousness and beauty for all.
Well, sounds all right, but who's going to pay for it?
They can pay for the war.
We're paying for the war, and I expect we'll pay for this, too.
But it's worth it, Daddy.
Yes, if we get it. Come on.
There's going to be lots of trees and green and parks, and it's going to be the most beautiful city in the world.
Will there be sand pits?
Yes, there'll be lots of sand pits and heaps of swimming pools.
Will there be air raid shelters?
No, we've seen the last of them, thank goodness.
In that case, I'm definitely against the plan.
Why?
If they're going to take in all the air raid shelters, how am I going to be able to play houses with Susan?
The townsfolk were split into two camps, the pros and the antis.
Absolute poison to business.
I expect it's a lot of old talk, nothing to be done.
That's what the election's for.
I hear they're going to build a new fish market on the North Quay. Oh, I've heard that.
Making the shopping area a precinct is merely an attempt to solve the traffic problem by killing the shopping.
But anyhow, you couldn't get rid of the Barbican if you tried. The Barbican's the soul of Plymouth.
Pity they weren't interested before the war. Then they could have seen us throwing the fish back into the sea night after night, year after year. And finish the end of the week up on the parish.
This vista doesn't help either.
The
city's got to be rebuilt anyway.
If we don't get a fair chance to compete with the large stores, that'll be the end of us, and the plan doesn't provide for that.
Our fathers put up a long fight to secure the freehold system.
Yeah, they've been talking about that this last 50 years.
But at least a poor plan is better than no plan at all.
Lord Astor led the pros in the House of Lords.
My lords, we need new powers. Powers to check ribbon development, powers to prevent factories being put up on choice market garden and farm land, powers to stop the old scandal when there were empty factories and idle hands in one region, while in another district new factories were being put up on residential sites. And above all, we need new powers to preserve our scenery, our hills, our downs, our valleys, our coastline. Scenery which has endeared these islands to millions of our men.
Such is the power of the Lords that nothing happened. There was no way, apparently, of finding out what the people really wanted. I got sort of curious about it myself. I dropped into the habit of asking questions and developed a technique for getting conversation round to the plan. That's when I first spoke to Alice. I was walking down the Tavistock Road to the museum where the model was on view. Somehow, I determined to find out what she thought. I managed to get into conversation. Her sailor seemed quite nice too. In fact, they were really a good representative couple. We chatted about this and that, and they seemed quite eager to go into the museum with me. I doubt if they'd ever been there before. Alice knew all about the plan, so she told me, but she'd never seen the model.
I don't think there's anything in it.
But aren't you interested in your own city?
Well, yes, but not this.
They'll never do it. What makes you say that?
Oh, they're not sufficiently go-ahead. Now, if it were America, that would be different.
But don't you understand? They means you. If you want it enough, you'll get it.
I don't know whether I want it or not. I don't think it matters much.
Well, now we're here, let's go and look at the fossils.
Not interested. They just don't understand. That's how ideas are killed. So much easier to kill an idea than look into it. Or can it be said that a good idea will always find a champion? At any rate, in the same museum, the subject was brought up again. The original council room, incidentally, had been blitzed.
Minutes of the Reconstruction Committee, Alderman for Clifford Closure. The time has now come for the council to approve the basic principles of the plan. Some of us are getting on in years. Yeah. I wish I were 30 years younger. A great opportunity. Let us have courage, determination, and vision to take advantage of this opportunity and to do something really worthwhile, not only for ourselves, but for future generations.
Councillor Taylor will move an amendment calling for an alternative plan. Councillor Taylor.
I move this amendment, my Lord Mayor, in the interest of the ratepayers, as great uneasiness exists in their minds concerning the gigantic size of the plan and the fear that they will have to carry an intolerable burden with heavy rates. In the plan, imagination has been allowed to run riot. I am informed that to acquire the land for the city centre will cost nearly £20 million. On the top of that, there is this gross piece of extravagance, the boulevard from North Road Station to the Hoe. Businessmen arriving by train will want to get to the city centre as quickly as possible. If the suggestion that I have put forward is adopted, the city will be reinstated in about 1/4 of the time and at about 1/10 of the cost. And it is more likely to receive the blessing of the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
I second the amendment, merely to test the feeling of the council.
But I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm not against the plan. But if it is so ideal, then surely an alternative plan will throw it into relief.
No. I view the amendment moved by Councillor Taylor, my Lord Mayor, with grave misgiving. For whom does Councillor Taylor think he is speaking? Where there is no vision, the people perish. And I cannot help thinking that Councillor Taylor is speaking for the people with no vision. His illustration of the traveller coming to Plymouth unable to drive his car through the picturesque highway that has been the dream of Plymouth citizens for years. To what does it amount? If he goes on foot, it is the shortest route to the city centre. If he goes by car, it can but add 2 minutes to his journey. The argument is a ridiculous one. The opportunity of raising a city magnificent in proportions and affording glorious opportunities for all its citizens is an ideal for which we should happily aim. Lord Mayor, in my view, it is impossible to rebuild the city under the provisions of the Town and County Planning Act of 1944. People whose only sin was that they took the main weight for the enemy attack will be called upon to rebuild the city on sites that they are not allowed to own, but merely lease for the short period of 99 years.
Short period?
Certainly.
My Lord Mayor, I think the plan now submitted to us looks exceedingly pretty picture on paper, but completely impracticable.
My Lord Mayor, for the first time we're hearing objections expressed to the plan. There have been whisperings in groups and in odd corners.
And pubs.
This plan, prepared by the finest experts that we could obtain, has been 3 years in the making. Every possible aspect has been looked into.
Except finance.
Including finance. Mr. Councillor Taylor tells us that the cost of the land will be £20 million.
Oh, rubbish.
And this fills him with fear. I'm not worried about it at all. The centre of the city will belong to the people of the city, who have created the values in the city and made it a worthwhile place.
Is this freedom?
We of the Labour Party stand for the plan. And if you care to challenge us on this issue, we shall be delighted to meet the electors.
Hear, 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 hear. My Lord Mayor, I welcome the amendment as giving an opportunity for a free expression of opinion. But I feel it is nothing more or less than a delayed action movement. It must be remembered that the plan is not a political issue, and it would be detrimental to the future of the city if it were so. In the meantime, we must proceed with all possible speed within the scope of present legislation.
All in favour of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Against the amendment?
I declare the amendment lost.
But still nothing happened, until after VJ Day, when a new source of labour came to the town. Plymouth, the Germans had boasted, had been devastated beyond repair. Beyond repair. Then it was found that the houses couldn't be put on the sites without complications from Whitehall. This didn't add much to family harmony.
I've a right to do as I like, haven't I? Didn't often I spend a bob on myself.
But where are you going?
Down the road.
You ought to have a little consideration.
I'm sick of the whole place. Sick of being cooped up here with not a shed to work in.
But what about me, having miles to walk for the rations?
And what
having to
about
fill
me in
half
the
time?
yard with a racket of the machinery all day and home here walking on needles?
Don't quarrel.
I'm telling you, this is no life for a man. And take your feet off my pillow.
Well, I'm off.
Where off to?
I don't know why I'm trying to make this a home.
She's going to meet Dorothy, I suppose.
As a matter of fact, I am.
Where?
By the sweetened car.
I don't hold with young girls walking alone on the hoe at night.
If she is going to meet Dorothy, all right. But I've got my doubts.
If you don't believe me, why don't you come too?
All right.
I will.
And I shall have a lovely evening sitting home knitting.
Oh, don't go and put your hat on and don't make a fuss.
You haven't said good night.
Good night, darling.
I'd never put up with all the questioning Alice gets. When I grow up, I'm going to leave home and have a room on my own. I don't care where it is, so long as I'm on my own.
Well, what are we going to do now? Look at the view?
Why not?
Only we came 5 miles to see it, and there's nothing to look at.
I wouldn't say that.
I like watching the people.
That's the herd instinct. The city caters for that.
About the only instinct it does.
Still, I don't want to leave the old place.
Why not, Mr. Copperwheat?
Well, my father lived here and his father before him, and I wouldn't be surprised but what some of my ancestors fought with Drake against the Armada.
It might be rather nice to live in America.
Well, suppose you bring him over, Alice, and let us meet him.
What do you mean?
You know.
I don't.
They must be very tired of waiting, and the grass is probably damp.
Do you mean those two over there?
That's right.
Oh, but they happen to be acquaintances of mine. Alice hardly knows them.
Yes, I'm sure. But go and fetch them.
You really don't mind if I do?
You're quite sure it's all right?
Yes, dear.
I knew there was something going on, but how did you twig?
I think I know my own daughter.
Well, why can't you be open about it?
Perhaps it's our fault in some way or other.
You think it's all right?
I hope so.
Trouble is with her looks, you can't be too careful.
Perhaps you can, George.
Mr. and Mrs. Copperwheat, this is Jimmy, and this is
How do you do?
How do you do?
How do you do?
Well, what do you think of Plymouth?
Oh, I've had a good time. I suppose you fellas will soon be leaving us. Most any day now.
And about time, too. Maybe we'll get a look in then.
Not unless you learn how to jitterbug.
Jitterbug, is that what you do?
Sure, she's a sharp article.
A what?
On the beam. The kid's good.
Well, do you think we might go for a walk or something?
Well, I guess that's about all we can do around here. How about coming along?
No, you go and enjoy yourselves. We'll be all right.
Okay, let's do that.
You sure you wouldn't like to come? You'd be very welcome.
No, that's all right. We'll stay here. She's too young to go larking about with Americans.
There's no harm in it.
Well, where do they go? What do they do?
Where is there to go? Dancing, the cinema, the hoe?
And he probably takes her in the pubs.
Well, the billet's no place to entertain. Strikes me it's time we had a home.
And what do we get? A rabbit hutch. I don't know what it's all coming to. First the dole, then there's the war, then there'll be exports. One day, I suppose, the workers will wake up when the little one's a grandmother. Out of the growing discontent, new leaders arose to fire the citizens with hope.
But how are we going to pay for it all? That is the question which everyone is asking. It is the vital question. We say it is unfair that the whole burden of rebuilding the Blitz cities should fall upon those who had to bear the brunt of the bombing. There are many towns and cities in Britain which have never heard Hitler's bombers overhead, which have never suffered the wounds and horrors which we have seen in the streets of Devonport and Plymouth. We have a right to aid from the nation. We say the burden must be shared. By this plan, we can make ours one of the most beautiful cities in the whole wide world. Yeah. And if we are given the aid which we deserve, we shall do it. Yeah.
Just after the election, there was a sort of anticlimax. Naturally, things couldn't get better overnight. But the people seemed more and more apathetic. It looked as though the stores would never move out of the badly needed houses. And the new houses looked horribly reminiscent of barracks. The shore patrols continued their grim parades, and the bomb sites began to get everyone down. I'd had enough. I went for a last stroll on the Hoe. I don't like war memorials, and yet somehow I always find myself looking at them. And then I noticed something rather odd. Youth. I've forgotten the impatience of youth. Will they help to bring the plan to fruit? A country where every shade of opinion is allowed, almost anything is possible. Cities of tomorrow, what will they be? Who can tell? For their story is still being written by the citizens of today.